This series is going to focus primarily on the literature and other media of the Western tradition, i.e., the line of cultural development which stretches from the ancient Mediterranean to the modern West, and in which many elements interact and recur over the course of centuries and millennia. But people are people, and it's worth taking some time to look at how some other cultural traditions have applied their imaginations to their literary and artistic creations. Let's begin with the traditional culture of the Indian subcontinent. The literature of ancient India is generally divided into two groups: the religious poems called Veda and the Sanskrit epics called the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. The Veda were first composed, though not written down, between 1500 and 500 BCE, and the epics in the centuries after that. There were also ancient collections of stories and other kinds of material called Puranas, which are centered on specific gods like Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu. Like the Greek author Hesiod, who we looked at last time, the Puranas are interested in what their authors saw as the beginnings of their world, including stories about the creation of the universe and the various gods they worshipped. For example, in one of the creation stories told in the Puranas, the god Brahma is born from a golden lotus which emerges from the navel of Vishnu, who was lying upon the Kshirasagara, or ocean of milk, which existed before the universe. Brahma then goes on to create our world. There are also Indian stories about the fantastic childhoods of various divine beings. The young monkey god Hanuman thinks that the sun is a fruit, and he nearly manages to devour it before he's stopped by the god Indra, while the young Ganesha acquires his elephant head when he brazenly challenges his father Shiva, who decapitates him. Regretting his impulsiveness, Shiva looks for a new head for the boy, but the first one he comes across is an elephant's. There are also many stories about the upbringing of Krishna, one of the avatars of the god Vishnu. We're told that even as an infant, he was able to defeat a powerful demon named Putana. Putana's heart was fierce and cruel, but she looked like a very affectionate mother. On that very spot, the fiercely dangerous demon took Krishna on her lap and pushed her breast into his mouth. The nipple of her breast was smeared with a dangerous, immediately effective poison, but the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, becoming very angry at her, took hold of her breast, squeezed it very hard with both hands, and sucked out both the poison and her life. Unbearably pressed in every vital point, the demon Putana began to cry. As Putana screamed loudly and forcefully, the earth with its mountains and outer space with its planets trembled. In this way, the demon Putana lost her life. She fell down in the pasturing ground in her original form as a demon. When the gigantic body of Putana fell to the ground, it smashed all the trees within a limit of 12 miles. Without fear, the child Krishna was playing on the upper portion of the demon Putana's breast, and when the cowherds saw the child's wonderful activities, they immediately came forward with great jubilation and picked him up. The Mahabharata is set against the background of a battle known as the Kurukshetra War. Though this war isn't mentioned in the Vedas, which preceded the epic, the Rig Veda does mention a battle of 10 kings which took place near Kurukshetra, in the Punjab, around 1400 BCE. But even if the Mahabharata is referring to an actual historical event, the epic remains closer to what we would call historical fiction. Like the Trojan War in Homer's Iliad, which may have been based on one or more battles at the site now identified as the city of Troy, it uses the event as the backdrop for an entirely imagined story. Another sort of story is found in the Upanishads, a set of philosophical discussions composed around the time of the later Vedas. Though these stories have characters and settings, they're closer to the philosophical dialogues of Plato than they are to the stories of the Sanskrit epics, in the sense that their narrative details are only window dressing for the ideas discussed in them. One of the Upanishad stories, for example, begins, Brigu, the son of Varuna, went to his father, saying, "Sir, teach me Brahman," i.e., the highest truth. Most of these dialogues are held between disciples and their teachers, though in one case, a young man has a conversation with Yama, the Hindu god of death. Like the ancient Western works we looked at last time, classical Indian texts, including Mahabharata and the Puranas, are interested in describing the distant past, and like the poems of Hesiod, our Indian works envision that past as a series of increasingly inferior ages. They tell us that there were 4 of these ages, called yugas, though unlike Hesiod's scheme or the story of Genesis, in which each age occurred only once and served as a transition between the age of myth and the present, the yugas constantly recur in a cycle of millions of years. During the first of the yugas, the Krita or Satya Yuga, men neither bought nor sold. There were no poor and no rich. There was no need to labor, because all that men required was obtained by the power of will. The chief virtue was the abandonment of all worldly desires. The Krita Yuga was without disease. There was no lessening with the years. There was no hatred or vanity or evil thought whatsoever. No sorrow, no fear. All humanity could attain to supreme blessedness. The progression of these 4 ages is characterized by a decrease in virtue and an increase in conflict and strife. There were also changes in the character of human beings. During the first age, the average human lifespan was 100,000 years. In the next, it was 10,000 years. In the third, it was 1,000, and by the current age, or Kali Yuga, it was 100 years and gradually decreasing even further. By the end of this age, which is expected to occur in the distant future, people will live until the age of 20. Likewise, in the first age, people were over 20 feet tall. In the second, they were 14 to 21 feet. In the third, 7 to 14, and now they grow up to 6 feet. The increasing conflict across the ages has also affected the human diet. During the Satya Yuga, as in the pre-flood era in Genesis, people were vegetarians. Then, in the later ages, they began to sacrifice animals. It's believed that by the end of the last age, their only food will be meat. It shouldn't surprise us that the 2 great epics, with their melodramatic and exciting content, are set during the middle 2 of the 4 ages. The first of these, the Treta Yuga, is the setting of the Ramayana, which is the story of the adventures of the Prince Rama and his companions, who go on a quest to rescue Rama's wife Sita from the demon king Ravana. Though the story takes place in some sense in the real world, Rama is from the Indian city of Ayodhya. He is an avatar of the god Vishnu and a perfect human being. The Mahabharata, on the other hand, is set in the age after that, the Dvapara Yuga, which resembles the age of heroes in Hesiod in the sense that people are noble and capable of great deeds. But because of the decline in virtue, they're also more likely to go to war against one another. This yuga is followed by the current age, which began more than 5,000 years ago, and like Hesiod's Iron Age, it's characterized by constant conflict and deceit. So while this scheme does account for the differences between the age of myth and the world in which these texts were composed, it doesn't assume, as the people of the ancient West did, that the world we know is going to last forever. Like the works of Homer, the adventure stories of Greek and Roman novels, and the Chinese Journey to the West, the Indian epics are structured around travels to distant lands. Rama and his companions journey to the island kingdom of the demon Ravana, which is traditionally associated with modern Sri Lanka and throughout India itself. The epic also mentions a number of foreign countries which may have been real places, but whose identity is now disputed. The Mahabharata, on the other hand, ranges from the Himalayas to the southern tip of the subcontinent, and also refers to Central Asia and Afghanistan. These ancient Indian stories also resemble Western works of the imagination in that they contain many fantastic objects which possess the magical power to do otherwise impossible things. The Mahabharata, for example, mentions the magical armor of Brahma, which is given to the warrior Arjuna and makes him invulnerable. Brahma also possesses a rod which can kill even the other gods. The Ramayana describes an herb called Sanjivani, which can cure any illness. There's also a substance called Amrita, which the gods consume to make them immortal. It was made by churning for 1,000 years the milk of the Kshirasagara, which also produced a deadly poison called halahala. There are also magical creatures like the divine monkey Hanuman, who accompanies Rama in the Ramayana, and the mermaid princess Suvarnamacha. One of the more famous magical machines described in classical Indian literature was the Vimana, which could be a flying chariot or an entire floating city, which moved at the will of its owner and could change its shape and size. In the Ramayana, the monkey Hanuman visits the palace of the demon king Ravana, and there he sees his Vimana, which is described as follows. After that, Hanuman saw Ravana's house, like heaven thrown upon the earth. He saw the car, like a beautiful cloud endowed with many hues, like the sky illumined by planets including the moon, decked with numerous precious stones, like a mountain peak, looking picturesque with numerous minerals. There the great Hanuman saw a great aerial chariot, shining with the name of Pushpaka, with the rays of precious stones, and capable of traveling long distances. That Hanuman, the courageous one, the son of Lord Vayu, saw the great aerial plane standing in the middle of that building with a surprising hue, and supplied with windows of burnished gold. That plane looked like a mark of the sun's orbit, manufactured by Vishvakarma himself, and praised by him as one without comparison in beauty. In that plane there is not even a small thing that is not made with great effort, and that there is nothing without the best diamonds. Like the works of Homer, the Mahabharata developed over centuries as a work of oral poetry, which the bards who performed it could vary as they chose, focusing on some characters or events over others. It therefore contains many secondary stories about its various characters. For example, it describes as follows the supernatural birth of the 100 brothers called Kauravas, whom the hero Arjuna fights for control of the kingdom during the Kurukshetra war at the center of the epic. One day, Gandhari entertained with respectful attention the great Dwaipayana, who came to her abode, exhausted with hunger and fatigue. Gratified with Gandhari's hospitality, the sage gave her the boon she asked for, that she should have 100 sons, each equal to her lord in strength and accomplishments. Some time after, Gandhari conceived, and she bore the burden in her womb for 2 long years without being delivered. It was then that she heard that Kunti had brought forth a son, whose splendor was like the morning sun. Impatient with the period of gestation, which had continued for so long, and deprived of reason by her grief, she struck her womb with great violence, without the knowledge of her husband. And thereupon came out of her womb a hard mass of flesh like an iron ball. When she was about to throw it away, Dwaipayana addressed the daughter of Suvala thus: "What have you done?" Gandhari, without endeavoring to disguise her feelings, addressed the sage and said, "You granted me the boon that I should have 100 sons, but here is only a ball of flesh for those 100 sons." Vyasa then said, "Let 100 pots full of clarified butter be brought instantly, and let them be placed at a concealed spot. In the meantime, let cool water be sprinkled over this ball of flesh." That ball of flesh then, sprinkled over with water, became in time divided into 101 parts, each about the size of a thumb. These were then put into those pots full of clarified butter that had been placed at a concealed spot and were watched with care. The illustrious Vyasa then said to Gandhari that she should open the covers of the pots after a full 2 years. Thus were born unto the wise Dhritarashtra 100 sons who were all heroes and mighty chariot fighters. Just as the myths of ancient Greece served as the raw material for the dramatic plays of classical Athens, one of the most famous Sanskrit poets, whose name was Kalidasa, wrote a number of plays based on stories from the Puranas and the Mahabharata. For example, in the play called Shakuntala, he expanded upon a story told in the Mahabharata of the woman whose descendants would be the warring cousins at the center of the epic. The play turns the narrative of the original story into dramatic dialogue and expands upon the plot of the original story. For example, the king who eventually marries Shakuntala is caused by a magical curse to forget her, and it's only because of a ring he had given her, which she loses and then finds again, that she is able to prove her identity. Kalidasa also set some of the play in a forest, which gives him an opportunity to describe the beauty of nature. Another imaginative genre familiar to Western readers, the animal fable made famous by the Greek writer Aesop, is also found in Indian literature. There is an ancient collection called the Panchatantra, while another, called the Hitopadesha, was compiled in the Middle Ages. Like Aesop's fables, unlike the medieval tales we'll look at in a few weeks, these stories were not originally intended for children, but were meant to teach good morals and behavior through entertaining stories. But in modern times, they have, like the others, become a source of children's literature. The Panchatantra, in particular, became very popular outside of India during the Middle Ages and was translated into many European and Asian languages. One of its stories, for example, is about a lion who is killing all the other animals in the forest. They volunteer to send him a single victim every day, to which he agrees. When the rabbit's turn comes, he goes off to meet the lion, but he arrives in the evening and tells the lion that he's late because another lion has stopped him and then sent him on with the message that he intends to challenge the first lion's rule. When the lion insists on meeting this competitor, the rabbit takes him to a deep well, and there he sees his reflection, and mistaking it for the other lion, he jumps in and drowns. The moral of the story is that cleverness can win out over brute strength. India's classical stories have also become an important part of its modern popular culture. For example, a series of comics have been published which retell the stories of the epics and their characters, such as Vishnu and Hanuman. Then there's the 2024 movie, Kalki 2898 AD, which is one of the highest-grossing Indian films ever made. It spans the entire range of our history of the imagination by being a mythological sci-fi film which blends the story of the Mahabharata with a dystopian far future. But that future is based not on the sort of post-apocalyptic visions that have become common since the Second World War, but on the idea that in the Kali Yuga, the final age of the world, it will reach its lowest point, but then be restored to perfection with the arrival of Kalki, the final incarnation of Vishnu. What makes the movie sci-fi is that it combines this traditional dystopia with advanced technology and a ruined environment, a combination we also see in movies like Alita Battle Angel and Elysium. In our next lecture, we'll go back to the Western tradition and look at the stories sung by bards in the Middle Ages about events like the Trojan War and heroes like King Arthur and Charlemagne, and its stories about the strange people and animals that medieval Europeans believed were to be found in distant parts of the world. Please remember to like and subscribe.